What is up, guys? It's NastyNasten here today, and I'm going to be bringing you guys my Darklord deck profile for the September 2020 format. This tends to be a bit more combo-centric than regular Darklords is played, and it can end on multiple negates as well as a couple of potential floodgates. If you guys want, you can stay tuned after this deck profile, and I'll show you guys a couple of the combos that the deck can pull off. But for now, let's start with the main deck. So to start the deck off, we're going to be running 3 Indulged Darklord. This is one of the best cards in the deck, as it can search any Darklord monster to your hand, as long as you're willing to put a Darklord on your opponent's side of the field. This can be an issue if you don't have a way to out it, but there's a couple of methods that we have that I'll show you guys a bit later on once we get to the spell and traps. Up next, this has been one of the best cards in the deck for years. It's Darklord a Shell. This is basically a trade-in for Darklords. You just discard it and another Darklord card to draw 2. It's very powerful and is the main core for the draw engine in the deck. It also gets an effect where you can pay 1,000 life points to copy one Darklord spell or trap effect in the grave, use the effect, and then shuffle it into your deck. This is great for going +1, and it can do multiple things such as destroying monsters, searching for Darklord cards, and even acting as a monster reborn. Up next, we have Darklord Superbia. This is one of the main combo pieces in the deck, as its effect reads, when this card is special summoned from the graveyard, you can target one fairy-type monster in your graveyard and special summon it. This is a when-if, but it is great for when you draw either Darklord Contact or Monster Reborn, because it's essentially going to be a +1, and if you use Contact to grab another Darklord, if you use a Shell, Nasten, or any other graveyard effect monster, you'll be able to use that again to get an additional monster. So this is a really powerful card that you're always going to want to run at 3. Up next, we have 2 Darklord Nasten, the namesake of the channel. Darklord Nasten is pretty good. He's the only Darklord that can special summon himself from the hand, but he does require 2 discards, discarding 2 Darklord monsters, which can be an issue when you're in need of resources, which is why I only run him at 2, because you really don't want to see him too much late game. He does have the same graveyard copying effect that a Shell does, so we can get back some of that advantage that he loses when you special summon him. Up next, we have 1 Darklord Amdusk. Amdusk is decent. He's basically another Darklord name in the deck, another Allure target if worst comes to worst, but he is good for grabbing a Contact from your grave, so the Superbia doesn't miss timing when you Monster Reborn it. He's also good for setting up the grave, say if you want to discard a Superbia. So he really has a couple of different functions, and he also has the graveyard copying effect that a Shell and Nasten also share. Another one of is Darklord Ukobak. Ukobak is essentially a walking foolish burial for Darklords. You just normal or special summon him, and you can send a Darklord card from the deck to the grave. This is great for dumping cards like Superbia into the grave, but it can also be good for sending spells and traps there if you want to copy their effects with any of the Darklords that have the effect copying effect in their card text. Up next, another level 8 Darklord Zerato. He's a walking Raigeki, as long as you discard a card, so more of a lightning vortex, but he's great for rank 8 plays as well as getting rid of problematic boards as long as your opponent doesn't have any more negates left. He can really help you sweep up the rest of an opponent's board and can let you go for an easy OTK, and you run him at 1 for trade-in fodder in easy rank 8s that you can combo into with Superbia. The last Darklord card, we run 1 Capricious Darklord. We don't really see her effect that much, but during the main phase, you can tribute summon a fairy monster. It's alright. It gets you an additional normal, which can be decent if you're running Morningstar. We do not, though. We run her more for rank 4 plays, especially with Abyss Dweller going off of Indulged, and that happens after we get her in the graveyard, after we special summon her off of Indulged effect to our opponent's field. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. First 2 non-Darklord cards, we have 2 Darklord Christia. This has been a staple in Darklord decks for years, and it just doesn't let either play or special summon monsters, which is rough if they break your board and you're left with just this on the field, but it can cripple most decks in the meta right now, and in a lot of cases it's just going to be an auto win. So what you do is you end up getting it in the grave off of something like Trade-In, and then if you use Superbia's effect when it's revived, you can revive Christia with it. In addition, if you have 4 fairy types in the grave, you can special summon this card from your hand, which is really powerful because it's pretty easy to manipulate the graveyard with this deck. And the last of the monsters in this, we have 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. I mean, it's the meta now. You have to run hand traps, so you're just going to lose to an Omni Negate board. There's not much that you can do about it, but we make do. It does lower the consistency a little bit, but that's alright. We're going to live with it. Now, up to the spells. First, we play 3 Banishment of the Darklords. This is a Rhoda for any Darklord in the deck. You can only use it once per turn, but you can copy its effect in the grave with Nasten, Ishel, or Amdusk, so that's alright. You're normally going to be getting its effect off more than once per turn. It's one of the most powerful cards in the deck, as it lets you get just about any piece that you need, and you really want to see it every single game. Next, Darklord Contact. This is a Monster Reborn for Darklords, again, once per turn, but again, you copy the effect with the Darklord cards. What you want to do with this is you want to revive Superbia and then revive another fairy like we talked about earlier, and it'll be an easy +1 and potentially more if you can use this effect again from the grave. This is an insanely powerful card, and it's one of the best ones in Darklords. Now to continue the draw engine, we're running 3 Allure, 2 Trade-In, and 2 Pot of Desires. This deck really struggles with consistency sometimes. Darklords always have, but running this many draw spells really helps you get to the power cards that you need and allows you to make some amazing plays. Trade-In gets fairies in the graves that you need there to get with Superbia. It can even get Superbia there so you can revive it. Allure, almost every monster in the deck is a dark, so you're going to see that in effect almost all the time. And Pot of Desires is an easy +1, but you hate to see it more than once per turn, so we're only running it at 2 right now. Up next, we have Super Poly, and this may be a controversial one for some Darklord players because Darklords did get a trap card that acts as a polymerization. However, we want to use Super Poly because Indulged Darklord puts a Darklord on your opponent's side of the field, so what you do with Super Poly is you simply use it when you get Superbia and another Darklord on the field, and you use the monster that you gave your opponent, and you go into the fusion monster that Darklords have recently acquired. It's a super powerful play, and if worst comes to worst and you brick, we have a couple of scapegoats in the extra deck, so you're able to Super Poly away all of your opponent's monsters anyway. Up next, 1 Monster Reborn. It's a Darklord Contact, but it doesn't have any restrictions. You can target a monster in either player's graveyard, and it can really just steal games. It's super powerful in Darklords because they constantly want to be brought back from the grave, and it's something you want to see all the time. The last spell we have is the one called by the grave, Rest in Peace. I'm hoping Konami realizes this was a terrible hit and that they fix this soon. Call by the Grave is great to see in your opening hand because you don't want to see your Indulged Darklord get negated by an Ash Blossom. She really sets up all the plays, and if you miss that, there's a chance that you brick with the rest of your hand, so Called by the Grave is a really important card to see. Unfortunately, there's not much we can do about it being at 1, but it's still nice to have that we can occasionally negate our opponent's plays. And last up, we have 2 traps. We have Darklord Rebellion and Darklord Enchantment. Rebellion pops a monster, and Darklord Enchantment takes control of an opponent's monster. Neither card's target, and their only cost is sending a Darklord monster from your hand or face up on the field to the grave. And if you're using their effect from the grave with one of the Darklord's effects, you actually do not pay that cost. So you only have to pay 1,000 life points in order to get their effects off. It's really powerful, and especially Enchantment right now with Dragoon running rampant in the meta, it's a great way to out him and just potentially sweep your opponent. Up next, guys, we're going to be moving to the extra deck, and we're going to start that extra deck with 1 Abyss Dweller. We talked about this briefly. We run the Indulged and the Capricious Darklord to make this. It's a really good way of shutting down certain decks, and it can go a long way towards winning you games pretty easily. It's pretty meta-dependent, so you can sub this out for any other rank 4 that you guys see fit, but I've had a lot of success running Abyss Dweller, and that's why I'm keeping it in the deck right now. Up next, we have a Galaxy package, and this is a little outdated, but we run Galaxy Eyes Cypher, Galaxy Eyes Full Armor, and Cypher Blade Dragon. We run this because you get 2 pops instead of 1, You can also sub in a Dingirsu and a couple other cards that is just as good and just as viable, if arguably not more so because of Dragoon being prominent in the meta. However, I like running this because you do get 2 pops as opposed to the 1. You just have to be careful because Indulged does not allow you to use non-fairy effects the turn you use its effect, so you want to make sure that you haven't used Indulged before you try to get these off. Up next, this one's been a staple in Darklords for a while. It's number 23, Lancelot. It's an Omni Negate. You just have to be careful because you're required to use it upon the first effect of the turn, including yours. But the great thing about this is that Indulge negates non-fairy effects during your first turn. So if you go into Lancelot, you can actually continue your plays if you have anything else to do because it won't be able to activate its effect. The last rank 8 is Hope Harbinger Dragon. We run this just as a spell negate. You never know when you're going to go up against Mystic Mine or any other deck kind of like that, so we run it just as a failsafe. It's also good for redirecting attacks when Appaloosa gets down to like 800 attack. The last of the Xyz monsters is actually just to be used against Dogmatica because we have Cyber Dragon Nova and Invoked Macabre. I don't really have to explain this one. It's one of the best counters for Dogmatica right now, and it's a good idea to run it in just about any deck that can make the space. Alright, we're going on to our Link monsters. We run 1 Herald of Mirage Lights. It's 2 monsters with the same type and attribute. Every Darklord has the same type and attributes. This is really easy, and discarding a fairy to negate a spell or trap, card, or effect is really powerful, which is why I really like running Herald of Mirage Lights in this deck. Up next, Condemned Darklord. This is one of the more powerful Darklord cards, although we don't use it as much in this deck. It's really good for searching out monsters, pitching stuff to the grave, tribute summoning even, and it really just depends on where you are in your hand if you're going to go into her or not. I tend not to because I tend to get the combo pieces I need, but if I ever do need her, it's great to have her in the deck. In addition, her 500 life points at the end of turn are really clutch for grind games where I'm getting down into the 2000 life point area and I'm really needing a boost. Alright, next we have Appaloosa, Bow of the Goddess. There's not much to say here. It's a fairy, so it works great in Darklords, which are all fairies. Can get potentially 4 monster negates on board. It's an insane card, and it's good in just about any deck that can run it. There's not much else to say here, yeah. In the last Link monster, we have a Boral Sword Dragon. Darklords tend to not struggle getting damage on the board, but it's good to have a failsafe if they do. Boral Sword is great for OTKs, as a lot of you guys know, and it's really just another combo piece you can run in this deck. You can also do something like Borload or any other Link that you want, but yeah, I run Boral Sword. Up next, we have the 2 additional Super Poly targets, that being Mud Dragon of the Swamp and Starving Venom Fusion Dragon. These cards are really just good for stopping opponents' plays when they're in the middle of a turn. It's kind of broken, Super Poly not being able to be responded to, but it's really good to have in this deck when you're up against such powerful decks as we are right now. And the last extra deck card is the first Darklord. This is one of the best extra deck cards that Darklords can play. Prevents fairy-type monsters from being targeted by card effects, which is insane. It acts as a monster reborn for any fairy-type monster, or you can special summon a fairy from the hand with its effect, which means if it's your opponent's turn, actually, because it's a quick effect, you can do something like summoning Christia from your hand, which they will never expect, and really just steals games immediately when your opponent sees it. It's one of the best cards that you can get on the field in your turn 1, and it really just works great way to extend all of your combos. So that is it for the main and extra deck. We're going to move over to the side deck, guys. This is more open for debate. I run it I run my side deck to fit what I face normally at like locals and stuff, because I'm not able to go to a lot of regionals, especially during this pandemic. But we'll just get on into it, and you guys can decide for yourself if you want to keep what I have. So first we have 2 Danko Sekka. It's great for back row decks. It's good for Mystic Mine even when they're trying to flip a bunch of traps on you. It's good for shutting down a lot of their plays. I go back and forth on running it, but it does essentially auto-win certain matchups, which is why I do enjoy running it at 2. More spell and trap, negation, removal is Twin Twisters. Everyone knows what this does. It's basically 2 MSTs for a discard, which can actually help you set up the grave a little bit, but it does let you work around Mystic Mine a little bit as long as they haven't called Twin Twisters to Omni-negate it, and it just really works well against certain decks. Up next, we have 2 Nibiru. You may ask yourself, why 2 Nibiru? I just find that there's other decks, or other cards in this extra side deck that are better for blowout plays. Nibiru's good, but it does leave your opponent with a body. And depending on the deck, they can still occasionally go through it, which can be an issue, which is why I only run it at 2, but if you want to run it at 3 or less, that's totally up to you guys. Alright, then we have the 3 Dark Ruler No More. This is why I run Nibiru at 2. Dark Ruler No More to me is just an objectively more powerful card, because your opponent just can't respond to with monster effects, which for a lot of decks, that's the only response that they have. So this essentially shuts down everything on the field that they have, and then you can go into your own combos. Up next, 2 Evenly Matched. Another blowout card that just removes a lot of cards from the field. I wouldn't say it's as good as Nibiru because they do have the opportunity to negate it when they actually have a board made, but it is really solid for whenever you need to get an edge over your opponent and you don't think that they can negate it. And up last in the side deck, this one's kind of a weird one, but you guys will have to hear me out when I get into the combos a little bit. But we have 3 Rivalry of the Warlords. It's basically meant for an indulged play where you throw a fairy on your opponent's side of the field, and then you just leave it there, and they can't really summon anything because there hasn't been a fairy competitive deck in years that I know of. So yeah, this is a really powerful card for just locking your opponent out of the game, and it works essentially as well as Christia as long as you guys can set your board up correctly. So that is everything in the deck, but we are going to take you guys over and we're going to show you guys some of the combos that you can run. I'll see you guys there. Alright guys, I'm going to try to move through this pretty quickly because I know the video is already getting a little bit long, but I'm going to show you 3 different deck replays where we end on different boards, the hands vary, and Darklords tend to rely on drawing to get to a lot of their combo pieces, so you guys are going to see that in these next 3 duels. So let's go ahead and just hop right in so we can get this done with. The first duel that I did, I've already activated the Pot of Desires. There's the 10 in the Banish pile, and those are the 2 cards that we drew, and we're just going to go on from here. From there, we activate a Shell's effect, discarding it in Superbia, and we're going to draw into a Christia and a Shell. After that, we're going to summon the Ukabak, so we'll be able to send a Darklord card from the graveyard. Here, you'll be able to see that I chose to send Banishment of the Darklords. Alright, after that we're going to activate Darklord Contact. That's going to special summon Superbia, and Superbia is going to special summon a Shell. After that we're going to use Amdusk's effect to discard itself in the Darklord Rebellion Trap card. That'll allow us to add a Darklord card to the hand. In this case we're going to add Banishment because we'll be able to use its effect to search a card. We're going to search Indulged Darklord. We're not going to be able to use it this turn, but we'll have it for next turn whenever we want to make a play. After that, we're going to activate a Shell's effect. We're going to copy the effect of Contact in the grave, so we'll be able to revive Amdusk. After we revive Amdusk, we're going to go ahead and shuffle the Contact back into the grave, as that is the last part of the Darklord's effect. Amdusk is going to use its effect, and we are going to copy Banishment here. With Banishment, we'll search a Contact again for next turn plays if our opponent breaks our board and gets rid of the Christia. After we do that, we're going to send all 4 to the grave, and that'll allow us to summon Appaloosa, getting 4 monster negates on board. And after summoning Appaloosa, we'll be able to special summon Arklord Christia, because we'll have the 4 fairies in grave. After it's special summoned, we'll be able to use its effect to add a fairy to hand. And this is what we're going to end with this turn. It's going to be a Christia negating all special summoning, and the Appaloosa negating 4 different monster effects. We'll have 4 cards in hand, including an Indulged and a Darklord a Shell, which will allow us to start combos, and a Darklord Contact, which will allow us to revive Superbia and another monster, assuming Christia is taken off the field. We're going to hop on over to our second replay here. As you can see, I already used Pot of Desires. I don't know why it's starting on its own. That's just what it's doing right now. But Pot of Desires banished 10, and then we drew 2 cards. So we are going to play Banishment of the Darklords. As you can see, this hand's a little bricky. You don't really want to see 2 Superbias at a time, but it's alright as long as we can get Indulged as we did. So next, we're going to summon Indulged. With Indulged, we'll grab a shell because we'll be able to pitch Superbia and her. Oh, and you guys are going to see that I am putting Capricious here. It does go to the opponent's control, but because this is a solo duel, I wouldn't be able to get the monster back. So I'm putting it there to symbolize it's in my opponent's control, but it's actually just on the field right now. We're going to use a Shell's effect, discarding it in Superbia to draw 2 cards. After doing that, we hit a trade-in, which will let us draw another 2 cards off of Superbia. There we see a super polymerization, which is really good because that's going to facilitate our plays with that Capricious Darklord. And you're going to see that after we do Darklord contact with Superbia, and then Superbia into a shell. After this play, we use Super Poly. We'll get rid of the Allure because we don't really need to draw anymore. We've hit just about everything we want to. And we're going to get rid of those 3 and go into the first Darklord. After we hit the first Darklord, we're going to revive Superbia with its effect, and in doing so, we'll be able to revive another Darklord. After we do that, we're going to use a Shell's effect. Sorry, that was a misclick there. We're going to use a Shell's effect instead, and we're going to copy the contact effect. When we copy the contact effect, we'll be able to summon the other Superbia. And it's here that you have it kind of a decision tree that you want to go off into. You can either go into any of the rank 8s that we have with the 2 Superbias, or you can go into any of the link monsters that we have. I choose here to go into Appaloosa again, because it is a fairy, and as I'll show you guys in just a second, the first Darklord, as it says here, your opponent cannot target fairy monsters you control with card effects, which means that Appaloosa is now impermanence proof, so they can't just shut it down with a simple trap card. And that is going to be the main play from this. I did hit end phase there, but what you would want to do is set the Called by the Grave so you can have an extra negate in their graveyard. You'll be able to negate a search as well. I also wanted to show you after the end phase, going into the main phase of the opponent's turn. If your opponent just passes after the main phase, say you negate enough cards and they just say end phase, you say at the end of main phase, you would summon Superbia with the first, as it is a quick play, as I've said, and with the Superbia, you'll go into another card. However, here I wanted to show you that I would just summon a shell, because that's far more likely that your opponent will have a play to make, and you'll want to go into the shell, use its effect, and then use Banishment in the Grave. It'll get you another starter for next turn, and with all of these negates, you're likely going to win this. That's a lot of damage on board for an extra monster reborn, 4 monster negates, a graveyard negate, and a search negate. So that's everything from that duel. We're going to go on to the last one. And this one was closer to full combo. It wasn't quite there because we couldn't get Christia on the field, but it still did really well. So we're going to go ahead and hit play, and we're going to skip ahead. Alright, here you see Pot of Desires. It's very likely that you see Pot of Desires turn 1, what with all the drawing you do. So we hit an Indulged off of that, which we already had, as well as a contact, so that's pretty unfortunate. But the great thing about drawing with these cards is that we're still able to make it work because we have additional draw power. As you can see here with the trade-in, we draw into Banishment, probably the most powerful card in the deck, because we'll be able to search any Darklord, in this case, or a shell. With the shell, we're going to discard itself and the Indulged, draw 2 more. We hit a Banishment, not great, but we hit Monster Reborn, and that's a major power card with where we are right now. So we're going to go Contact, we're going to hit Superbia, and with Superbia, we'll hit a shell. Up next, we have Super Polymerization. You guys have seen this part before, where we take our opponent's monster and 2 of our own into the first Darklord. After that, the first is going to use its Monster Reborn effect, and it's going to go ahead and grab the Superbia, and with the Superbia, it's going to grab Capricious. After that, we have more plays to make, so we'll be able to do this first. We'll go into Herald of Mirage Lights. This is going to let us negate a spell or trap next turn, which is going to be beneficial if we don't just want to negate monster effects. We're going to use Amdesk's effect here, discarding itself and another Darklord card, which is going to allow us to add a Darklord to the hand. Little thing real quick before we continue, you are able to add the card that it discards with itself, and you can add itself as long as you have other Darklord contacts beforehand. However, here I had 2 banishments and I simply added the other one. Just wanted to clarify that for anyone who was curious. So we're going to hit Monster Reborn, of course. We're going to do Superbia, get our easy +1s here, and we're going to go into Amdesk. Amdesk and Shell have not used their effects yet, so first we're going to use Amdesk. We're going to go ahead and hit Contact and get another monster on the field. And a shell is going to go ahead and use its effect to copy a banishment. This is going to be really good because, as you can see, we don't yet have a fairy type in hand, so Mirage Lights is kind of dead. But with this banishment, we are going to be able to add a fairy to the hand, which is going to give us that proper negate. I went ahead and put the banishment in the deck before searching, just because it's all the same in a solo duel. So here you see we have a fairy in hand with a herald on board, and we're getting rid of these 4 monsters to go into a link 4. Of course, it's going to be Appaloosa. So with Appaloosa, we are going to have 4 counters on it. So that's going to be 4 monster negates, a spell or trap negate, and then a monster that prevents the targeting of fairy monsters, and will also be able to special summon any fairy from the grave next turn. So as you can see, this board is pretty powerful. There's not much your opponent's going to be able to do unless they specifically have not called by the grave, sorry, Dark Ruler no more. Or if they go ahead and Nibiru you, the deck is a little susceptible to Nibiru, but that's what we run the risk for in order to get a board like this. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed these replays. If you guys have any more questions for me, go ahead and feel free to ask them down below in the comments. I'd be happy to help you guys out in any understanding issues that you have with this deck. It's a lot of fun, and I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I have. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.